Welcome to Cosmic Roadmap. I'm your host, Melissa Lambor, Reiki Astro Geo Guide and best-selling author. Have you ever wondered where in the world you should be? This podcast is about bridging cultures and helping the endless wanderer find their purpose and place in the world. Hear stories from digital nomads, avid travelers, and aspiring globetrotters, and learn how they discovered where they were destined to be and build their legacy. If you're curious about astrogeography and where you're meant to be on the planet, go to cosmicroadmap.com to download your free passport to purpose. Welcome to the second season of Cosmic Roadmap. I'm coming at you from Bali, Indonesia. I'm your host, Melissa Lambor. My special guest today is Michelle Gardiner, currently based in Bali. She is the founder and director of the Aspire series, including Aspire Société, the Aspire Summit, and 55 Faces. These are both a movement for women who are dedicated to pioneering social change and impact, as well as a methodology in facilitating change work. Michelle has spent over 15 years working in Australian child protection and community sectors, supporting children, young people, and families through some of their most vulnerable life experiences. It is Michelle's intention in creating the Aspire series that as women, we can become more connected and heart-centered leaders and use one another to become the best that we can be for ourselves and the future women who model themselves on us. Our stories truly are the gateway to enabling and facilitating so much of the change that we each wish to see in the world. She firmly believes that we are here not only for ourselves, but to be both a beacon and soft landing place for others, and to leave the world better just by us being here. So I met Michelle at a children's orphanage here in Bali while celebrating Christmas with the children. And fast forward a few months later, I said yes to being a co-author in her second edition of 55 Faces. I'm excited to meet inspiring women from around the world through the book and alongside Michelle this June as she hosts her first Aspire Summit. I hope you can join us too. Right, welcome. How has life been for you since leaving Australia and coming to Bali? I know that we looked at your Astro Geo chart and, we saw that in Bali you had Saturn energy, which is all about discipline. How has that connected to how life has been?
Yeah, gosh, where do I start? Often, like recently I've been thinking about Bali and I was like, it's been 3.5 years almost since I've been here.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. A third of a decade.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like hearing that I have discipline here, sometimes it makes complete sense. And other times I'm just like, are you for real? What kind of discipline are we talking about? I'm not sure if that's really discipline. But yeah, like I think intuitively I knew before I arrived that this would be a place I created my work, or I knew like from part of my journey that it would be where I create my work. Only I thought that it would take about 5 weeks, not 3.5 years. So I think that's the way, right? Like before you start doing the whole entrepreneurial thing, you're like, oh yeah, cool. I can just like whip up this thing and we'll be up and going in no time. And then you kind of it's actually a much longer commitment.
I think a lot of us come to Bali hoping, that it'll, streamline things or it'll catapult us in that direction. But at least for me, it's been like a deep rest because I left my career of 13 years and you also left a long career as well. So maybe Bali almost, takes you in and you're in Mama Bali's womb and it allows you to rest to finally come up to that moment of greatness that you're meant to shine. So
hugely. And I know that was a large part of my 2020 when I first arrived. I thought I was going to go on this mad trip I was going to backpack like the southern route of the Silk Road. And yet I arrived and I was completely and utterly burnt out. Couldn't think straight. Hadn't even organized a thing for my trip. And I was like, yep, I'm going to have business built in 5 weeks. Like 2020 was very much like, no, you're sitting still and you're not doing a lot. I did some work for a charity at that point in 2020. And then it wasn't until 2021 that I relaunched my business. But at the same time, like kind of threw myself into the business world and was very new to it. And it wasn't until later in the year and I kind of threw my hands in the air and went, I just don't actually know what to do. And just went, Mama Bali, just give me ideas, give me something. Like, what do you want it was at that point when 55 Faces landed. And originally it was incredibly simple. And I had people saying to me, why are you doing this thing? Why are you sharing other people's stories? Why would you do that? You need to focus on building a business and work out what your own story is. But the funny thing was that at the time, like, I had no words. I had nothing to say, and I felt like I had nowhere to move. And I was like, well, like, in so many ways, it was my saving grace. In so many ways, it was like, well, I know how to help people share their stories. And I know that I do that really well. And, I had a whole professional background in that. So that's a starting point. It's somewhere to begin. And I think because, like, Australia in particular and Bali and really a lot of the world was still in lockdown and navigating this whole new thing, where a whole bunch of people just got on board and got really excited by it. And it kind of just took off and has gained momentum since then. And like, it's, yes, I do it, and also I don't. Like, I drive it and I kind of maneuver and
it's like the energy that people are, that you're attracting people right into this project. And it's beautiful that it started as this passion project that also turned into the business, right? Yeah, it's just like, I was in a coaching program and I was supposed to come up with like a group program, right? Like at the very end. And what came out of it was this podcast. So similar to you, I also wanted to share stories. I'm like, what is the best way to showcase like my past clients and their amazing stories? And I'm like, a podcast. So it wasn't that I was fully confident to be on the microphone and to share my own story. It was really to push stories that were beyond me. It was all beyond me. It wasn't about me. So I feel like that we're on similar paths.
Yeah. And actually, it's funny. I was in a group coaching program at the time too, and the same thing. It was about developing a program, and I built a program and it didn't land because it needed, from what I now know, there was a lot more work that needed to happen before it was ready.
The community, right? Yeah.
Right. And all the other, the brand building, the message building, all the things around it. But yeah, and at the time the coach was like, why would you do that? Why would you share other people's stories? I'm like, I don't know, but it just wants to happen. So I'm just going with it. And then it's turned into 2 books, and now it's turning into another 2. And, I wanted to have a summit, but I wanted to be a small thing, and then it wanted to be a big thing.
Yeah.
And well, all the ideas I've had have been big. And yeah, it's so counterintuitive in many ways, because we get taught to, start small and to start humble, and then to grow into it little bit by little bit, make it bigger, make it better, and blah, blah, blah. But the problem is that everything that I wanted to do was huge. So it was kind of like this big kind of like run and leap.
Yeah.
And then kind of crap, and then like backpedal and fix all the bits and then catch up again.
Yeah.
But I mean, who am I to, something that I've learned really strongly, particularly here in Bali, is who am I to counteract what wants to happen in the way that it wants to happen? And these have actually been really big learnings for me again in the last week, because I started at that point in 2021. At the end of 2021 and in 2022, where I just went, you know what, I'm just a vessel. Like, I'm at the point where I don't know what you want from me, so I'm a vessel. You just tell me and I'll do it. Like, I'm your employee.
Right.
Take my body and get me typing on the keyboard, but you just do. And I think this year, or in the last 6 months, I've gone into this other space where I've been like, okay, I need to plan, and I need to be organized, and I need to have proper material, and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But just in the last week, it's almost like the universe is just laughing at me. And it's just kind of like, you know what, like, just let go. Like, just let go. And it's going to happen in some weird way. Like, no matter what you try to do, it's going to happen in a weird way. It's not going to happen in the functional way that they tell you to do. So you just kind of need to let go and let it come through however it wants to come through.
Yes. And especially with the full moon, with the lunar eclipse, all the retrogrades that we were in, it's just this energy of surrender, right? Surrendering and allowing things to just happen how they're supposed to happen, right? Letting the chips fall how they're meant to fall. So, and how did you get to the Aspire series? Like, how did that come to fruition? when was that seed planted? Because you weren't always, being a coach or doing multi-author books. You were in social work before, right?
Yeah. And I was 22 when I started in social work. In child protection. And it's funny because a lot of people go, oh, how do you go from social work and child protection to doing something like the Aspire series? But the thing is, if you look at the journey, like, it's incredibly logical and it makes sense. It makes complete sense. And I think that social workers by background, like, we're storytellers. Brené Brown was a social worker. She never practiced, but her work has all been in research.
Right.
But by nature, like, what do we do all day? We meet people and we tell stories about their lives. We take those, they tell us about their lives, and we take that information away and we go and speak to other people and tell them about those people in their lives. We go and write documents. We go and write reports. We go and speak on behalf of them at court or at schools or to all kinds of other organizations. Like, by nature, we're telling stories about people and advocating on their behalf. Like, that's the bulk of social work. And yeah, I guess, like, my career, I have followed my nose, but I've also followed my curiosity, and it's never led me astray. I think if you find a problem or you find something that you've got a question around, you sit with it long enough, like, you chip away at it. Your conscious, your brain, your subconscious, it starts chipping away at it. And at some point the answers start revealing themselves. And like, from child protection, the biggest question I had when I was in child protection, I was doing the front end crisis work, was around, what are the long-term implications of the decisions that we make? And I then found myself working as a long-term case manager and studying child psychoanalytic psychotherapy. And from that work, the biggest question that I had was, there were two. One was, there were three. How do we better hear the voice of young people? How do we better support young people when they're leaving care? And how can we work more creatively with young people? The next role that I had for 7 years was working at the Create Foundation with young people who had left care, helping them to share their stories and to better improve the care system and to have a voice within the system that they had just left. So the answers...
So the seeds were being planted. Yeah.
Where were we going next? Because we've already planted the seeds for it to reveal itself in some way. And that job that I had spotted that job, I decided 9 months earlier that I wanted that woman's job because I saw her present at our organisation at a team meeting. And I remember very distinctly saying, I want her job. 9 months later, I was in New York and a couple of weeks away from flying back to Australia, and I Googled jobs in Melbourne, and that job came up, and I applied for it from New Orleans and came home, and by the end of the year, it had been offered to me. And basically in that role, my whole job was around creating anything that I did was around lived experience and co-design and helping young people to have a voice and a say in their lives and coming up with really cool and innovative solutions around how to do that. And I had a really great boss who supported that. And yeah, I ended up creating a platform called The Hour of Power, where we had young people share their stories and their lived experiences and the problems they saw in the sector and their ideas for solutions to a panel of ministers, commissioners, CEOs, and there would be an audience of about 100 people who oversee that. So from there, I don't know, it was just a natural progression into leadership and spending lots of time with people in leadership and all that kind of stuff. In my own life, I've been studying life coaching and yoga teacher training, and I've done a bit of stuff around narrative therapy as well and tons of personal development. I became a little bit obsessed with women's circles. To the point where I went, okay, surely I can figure out how to run a women's circle. And that ended up kind of being my inroad to Aspire in a way. And, I did my yoga teacher training because I wanted to learn about the body, because I'd spent so much time learning about the brain. I was like, surely the body has something to do with all of this stuff. But then through that, I realized that I didn't actually like teaching yoga, but I loved this whole concept of sitting in a circle with other people. I was like, there's something powerful in this. So when I launched Aspire, it came largely through the obsession at the time around women's circles and things, but also my own questions around, what does it mean to be a woman when you've outgrown all your female role models, and where do you next? And I was sitting with that question. And so I started Aspire. As soon as I launched it, I felt that it was entirely wrong. It was women's circles, yoga classes, and the odd program, the odd retreat. I was still working, so I was playing with ideas.
Right.
And as soon as I launched it, I thought this is based in the wrong spot.
So the offerings weren't aligned. Like you had the Aspire series, but it's just, there was some misalignment.
It felt too small. It felt too small. Like, call something, you have to be careful what you call something, because it becomes it. If you call something Aspire, it's like a hot air balloon. And this thing the whole time has been like a hot air balloon. It's like it wants to be big and it wants to be noticed and it wants to take off. And it's full of hot air. And here I was going, I'm just going to teach some yoga, even though I don't like teaching yoga, and it's going to be based in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And this thing was like, are you for real? So as soon as I launched it, it felt all wrong. I loved the women's circles. They always came together really organically. But the thing I struggled with was that I felt that I could draw so much more out of the women that I had in circle. And circle isn't designed for that. It's designed for being present with, not for creating transformation in that kind of way.
Right.
And I wanted to have some way of being able to show these women, like, this is actually who you are and what is possible for you, and, what change you can create in the world. So I then, through various things, ended up called into the Amazon jungle. Went into the Amazon jungle, very clearly saw myself in another jungle.
Where in particular did you go in the Amazon jungle? Like Peru, or was it Brazil?
Peru. Are you looking at my chart thing?
Yes, I am. I was curious, and
I'm pretty sure there's some like big shadowy stuff over it or something.
No, it's actually, you have sun energy there, moon energy. So, the energy of being seen and recognized, the moon energy having to be grounding. And that's a major line that you have there. Also healing from Chiron, and it's DC, so connecting with others. And the other one was Uranus energy, so AC. So it's a lot of downloads. So it makes sense that you have two major lines there, the grounding and also the download. So what was it that actually came about in the Amazon jungle?
There was a lot of healing, of my maternal line. Surprise or no surprise. There was the vision. I asked for a vision because I felt very complete in that chapter of life. I felt very complete in Melbourne. And it's funny, the stuff that came out around Melbourne, because I'd had various like healers or tarot card readers or shamans or whatever say over years, like, you do well in Melbourne, but you'll do much better further north. Right? I always had that in my mind, but at the same time didn't want to leave Melbourne because I had this amazing life, very transformative, as we spoke about. Loved it in many respects and found it very difficult to leave. So after I came back, so in the jungle, I saw a very clear picture of me being in another jungle and creating my work in the world, another jungle that would be bringing women in.
Right.
And that has since I've been in Bali, I've spoken to a priestess who basically confirms the same kind of location. And so I went back to Melbourne and just went, that was nice, that was a lovely experience, I've done the jungle thing, I can go back to Melbourne. As you know, it doesn't work that way, and I had Bali screaming out at me, and basically decided to fly to Bali.
And you're resistant, right? Because as an Aussie, it's like it's so cliche, right, to go.
Hugely huge. I didn't want to be an Aussie in Bali, so that was part of my thing, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Also, I didn't really know or understand Bali or what I would even do here. And I thought, surely I'll be bored after about a month. So I booked in for 5 weeks, and then I thought, right, cool, I'll just spend that time building my business, and then I'll take off and go traveling, and I'll travel the Silk Road. And I had ideas about where I wanted to be and where I wanted to end up. One was the Mediterranean, the other one was Spain. And I arrived in Bali, and something said, you're home. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm going traveling soon. Something said, don't leave. And I was like, no, I'm going. Flew to Penang,
Mm.
and I went to a wedding. Then I flew to Vietnam. And only a few days after I landed in Vietnam, things turned really weird and the world shut down. And it was at that point that I was going to plan my trip. And I just went, okay, what do I do? So I really didn't want to come back to Australia because it'd take me so long to leave. And I packed up life. I was like, what am I going back to?
Right.
So I just came back to Bali. Yeah, I spent the first year building. I feel like I've kind of told the end bit of the story. Now I'm kind of
Yeah.
feeling. I spent the first year doing work for a charity in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided in 2021 to close down the charity. And that's when I then dived back into Aspire again and just went, well, I don't know where I'm going or where I'm starting, but I just need to figure this whole thing out. So yeah, 55 ended up being the driver in many ways. And of Aspire, I didn't know how the rest of it would fit in, but it's ended up kind of molding itself around that. So yeah, that's kind of how I've ended up here 3.5 years later, and I've been bouncing back and forth between Australia and Bali since about August.
Yeah, and it makes complete sense because you have that Saturn energy, that discipline energy, and not far from Bali, right? It goes through Lombok, and you even mentioned you spent some time in Gili and Lombok over, was it the Christmas break? And usually that's kind of like an area of relaxation or partying, but you felt like just like down to business type of energy. Yeah. So what did you feel when you were there?
Well, I ended up being sick in Lombok, and yeah, but both places just felt very strong. Yeah, very strong, but very grounded. Yeah, it was a weird time when I arrived in Lombok because there were storms that only happened as soon as we arrived, and they actually ended up stopping all the boats off Lombok. And so I didn't know anyone there, and I was in a tiny little place. So I ended up just kind of being bunkered down and sick, but having like this mass plan to do all this work.
Right.
And then I ended up going back across to the Gillies, and it's the second time being in the Gillies. And both times I felt like this, I don't know if it's been really an embodied sense to do a lot of work, but almost like this pressure to really like commit to do something. So yeah, it's on a weird level though.
Yeah, and it's that Saturn energy because I call it the grandpa energy, right? Just like yeah, of that discipline, that self-discipline. So yeah, very interesting. So can you go into how people can work with you, especially for the 55 Faces and then the summit, and then you also have a group program, right?
Yeah, I do. So 55 Faces, I should probably explain what it actually is. I don't think I've done that yet.
Yeah.
So 55 Faces, there are 2 books in each edition, I suppose you could say.
Yeah. And I'm excited to be in the second one, so which is coming up. Yeah.
So basically, there are 2 books. The reason why there are 2 is because one is global and one is local. Each showcases the stories of 55 women. So, and 55 different and diverse women across the world, but each is positioned as a leader and positioned as having a voice and something that contributes to change. Everybody, by mere fact of having something to say, has the capacity to lead change, is my belief. So each woman answers the exact same 3 questions, which this is who I am in the world. This is the next story I want written for women. And this is the next story I'm writing for myself. And there's like a photo, where she's from, where she now lives, and her age as well. So there's no anonymity in any of it. And we launched the first one in February this year, and the first global one, and the first local one was just recently, and that was the Bali, Indonesia book. So I think we ended up with about 58 women in that one, who are mostly from Bali, but also from other parts of Indonesia. And because they're from a more localized area, it tells more of a story of their culture, how you see them within their culture, and you see similar threads across the women. This year we have, again, the global book, and the local book will be across Africa, across several bits of Africa, which I'm super, super excited about. And so that's that. We've also got a summit, the Aspire Summit, which is in Bali in June. It's coming around super fast, far too fast for my liking, but that's okay. That is basically a bringing together of women and a celebration of women who are leaders, who are leading change, stepping into another iteration of who they are in their leadership. And also, it's when we come together that we have the opportunity to speak, to share, to contribute to change. And I think that's when the magic happens. So that happens in June as well. And then I guess I also have a group program as well, which is for women that are wanting to lead change in some way. And through that, they end up being published through 55. They end up speaking at the summit. And they also develop a project as well that they facilitate in the world.
And who usually would be like an ideal person to go through that program? Because it's a six-month program, right? Overall. Or it's 6 to 12 months, right?
Yeah. So it's a woman. Well, there are various different types of women, but basically there is a key way that they want to create change. So it can be through someone who wants to develop something new from scratch. It can be someone who wants to create change in an organization that they're already a part of. It could be a woman who already has a business or an organization that's up and thriving and they want to develop a social impact arm or something like that. Social impact and social change is what I'm most passionate about, and particularly around rewriting women's stories. So anything that threads all of those themes together is really the jam and the juice of Aspire.
Yeah. And I love that the next local book is in Africa, because we looked at your map and you had all your major energy centers down in South Africa. Was it Mozambique, Madagascar, Kenya, Uganda? And those are some of the places that you are already have connections, right? So do you feel like there's maybe a summit in the future in Africa?
It's funny, this is something that I've sat with, because part of the purpose of the summit is to bring local and global women together.
Right.
But speaking to the cartology, I feel very strongly that the summit lives in Bali. So I feel so strongly that it lives in Ubud. Ubud is home to the summit.
Okay.
And I don't think it's the only home of Aspire, but it's definitely a home of Aspire in Bali. So in Ubud. And, such a strong feminine energy here. It's such a strong healing energy. And it's also, I don't know, it feels like a center as well. Like there's so many people from so many different places here, and such a big focus for women's work and also people that are leading change as well. So I feel like this is where it's meant to be. This is the summit.
And it makes complete sense, because with that Saturn energy, because you don't have any other energies to kind of affect the whatever you're working on. So it makes complete sense that you feel like this is the center. Yeah.
What I do feel for Africa and for future impact books, I feel like there will be like a small group of women that would go out and launch the books in those places. And this is also the first time that this is being announced in any kind of official forum. But and it's only because you've asked as well. So, I do feel that there would be something that isn't the summit, but it would be like a small group of women actually going and visiting the women that have been a part, like women from the global, visiting and being a part of a celebration in 2 or 3 of those different spots, Africa or wherever it ends up being in future as well.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, and I see, like doing book readings, like people, the women reading their chapters, celebrating their stories. That's really lovely. And where do you see 55 Faces, the summit, going in the future? Where do you see it expanding to? The local books, right? What would be like the third book? What's already brewing?
I have the third and the fourth lined up in my mind. It's funny, like when you say expanding, like that petrifies me, because as said, this thing is a hot balloon, and if you give it space, it will expand. And it's like, can you just hold your horses and let me? Like I'm still mostly one person, so I feel that there are the three key components of Aspire now, and they feel really good and really solid around the books, the summit, and the program. And I'm more than happy. My word for this year is established. So I'm more than happy for them to just hang out and to just be established. Having said that, it's already expanded because I've spoken about having a small group that go out and meet, right, and doing more local book launches as well as the summit.
Right.
So that's already a fourth thing. I do have other things up my sleeve that I want to create, but I feel that they're a little bit further on down the path. In terms of further local books, the third one, which feels a little bit challenging, and it really should be the easiest one in many ways, but I feel that the third one is Aboriginal women, Aboriginal Australian women. Yes. I am Australian, so I feel like that's quite strategic in terms of my own life as well, being the third one. I feel that doing the furthest away one is easier at this point. And then I feel like the third one will be like more of a homecoming in some sense, but also looking at, I suppose, the culture and the background in Australia and some of the challenges around this, that actually in some ways is the toughest one to put together.
You know, it's fascinating that you're going back to the roots, right? The ancestors, the original ancestors of Australia, because we were just talking about Uluru, and you have your Mercury IC, your communication energy, and IC has to do with ancestors, with the past. And that Mercury communication energy is bringing those stories of the past, bringing the stories of the ancestors of the land. It makes complete sense that that would be the third book. I love that.
Yeah, it feels really important to do, but also it feels like it has the most blockages around it at the moment. Whereas the African one is happening almost organically. Like everyone seems to know someone who knows people in Africa, and they're just like, oh my God, we'll connect you. So it'll be interesting to see how the Aboriginal one opens up. But just the other day, I had a fourth one come to me that I would love to do. I would love to do a Middle Eastern one as well. Women in the Middle East. Yeah, I think that would be really fascinating and quite challenging in many ways. Yeah, I think there's something really, really powerful in that as well. So
yeah, that's so beautiful. And how can people reach you? How can they connect with you? I'll have all your information in the show notes, but yeah. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so it's the Aspire series. So www.theaspireseries.com or hello@theaspireseries.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn as well.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm grateful that we connected, right before Christmas time at an orphanage when we were volunteering. And that we've continued our friendship. And now I'll be in this second book, 55 Faces, and the summit as well. So I'm so excited to continue seeing this grow because it's definitely expanding and it's meant to keep growing. So thank you. Thank you for everything that you're doing and planting the seeds for the future. So thank you. Remember, lineage goes beyond your ancestors. You are meant to connect to the cosmos so you may finally find your cosmic family. Until next time. Thank you for listening to Cosmic Roadmap. If you would like to book a session with me to explore your own cosmic roadmap and chart your next destination in business, love, and life, then head over to cosmicroadmap.com.